morning, ASEAN. Welcome to the ASEAN Breakfast Call this morning. It's a beautiful Monday on the 31st of March 2014. We have guests with us today and they come from Sekolah Activism. Alexandra.
Hi.
And Vince.
Hi, hello.
And of course, we also have our host today, Arlene.
Hello. Hi.
How's everyone doing this morning?
I'm
Great.
feeling very good, Vienna. I hope we'll be better this week compared to last week. I can talk a bit more myself.
Yeah, like feel free, it should be a free flow show, huh?
Yeah.
So, and it's of course a discussion between friends. So yeah, just coffee shop talk. All right. So unfortunately today we'll have to start the news with MH370, some of the updates, talking about how the Australians are unable to find any results from their search, and this is coming from the Star, talking about how they are summoning their ex-military chief in Australia to take over the searching efforts in Australia, because the last debris that they find is apparently just some fishing equipment and also some rubbish on the ocean surface. Yeah. So that's the first one, and then followed by The Guardian talking about how Chinese relatives arrives in Malaysia to demand answers. 24 of family members flew into KL to meet the highest officials as the search is still drawing blanks. So what they are presenting is actually a pretty unified front this time.
I heard they were also protesting in the Grand Dorset, Subang.
Ah, is it?
Yeah,
That's
I
very
think
near my house.
Yeah, it's just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, I read the news on Yahoo Malaysia. They were all coming by together and just discussing, having a press conference and all that. So you would see that now the communist country, they are as well having all this democratic, fighting for their own democratic rights as well.
So of course that we think that they do have a right to an explanation of what happened to their family members, because I think it's only sensible, like, if you have a family member, let's imagine like your dad or your wife who suddenly just went missing after a flight.
We saw all those pictures, especially the lady crying, just pulled out of the car. It's very, very sad to see. We all feel for her and all that, and all the members, all the family members of the crew and passengers.
Right. And I think one of the things that's worth mentioning about is, like, for example, in this news article, they talk about how there were 30 Malaysian volunteers in pale blue polo t-shirts. This is actually a bunch of volunteers, I later found out, that comes from the international and also Malaysian Tzu Chi branch. It's a Buddhist humanitarian organization around the world, and they have been really actively involved in this MH370 episode. For example, they provided a lot of things like mainly counseling, and just accompanying the victims of the MH370 families throughout the whole process. In fact, some of them went to Beijing from Malaysia. Some of them are here, and they're actually taking over Malaysia Airlines hotline number, especially when it comes to MH370, because Malaysia Airlines actually asked them to help, because those are volunteers who are actually trained in disaster relief and especially counseling and whatnot.
That's good to hear. With that, we are providing much more help from the people as well, getting other organizations to help out and stuff like that.
So definitely there's a lot of ways you could help out if you want to. In fact, I know a friend who set up a website, to encourage donations to MH370. But of course, this is a true Bitcoin. And of course, he is also wary that he's not taking any cut, but he just wants an organization to get something out of it, to be able to channel that to family members.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, I think a lot of Malaysian people, they are very much sympathizing not just the Malaysian victims, but mainly the international victims. So this is something that I think that we should say kudos to our Malaysian public and the volunteers themselves.
But of course, some Malaysians are actually hitting back at China because for all this time they have been playing defense. This is coming from the Straits Times, talking about how Malaysians are starting to defend themselves even more at all the Chinese criticism over the lost MH370 flight, right? So
I think we have to probably see this in a different perspective. In a sense, this is something new even to us Malaysian when it comes to such international scale disaster, whereas we never really question our government when it comes to like providing us answers. So when it comes to such huge scale and international people are quick to sort of like asking the government, and also maybe a bit too over the limit of like lashing out on Malaysia. But I think in a positive sense, it sort of show that the government needs to be accountable to people in general.
Yeah, in fact, actually, even a lot of unhealthy sentiments are along the lines of, let's say, racial comments, which I think that wasn't appropriate for this, because there are a lot of, let's say, Chinese from China, for example, who would say to Malaysian Chinese, talking about how, why would you guys be traitors and whatnot? Yeah.
That's a bit far-fetched.
Yeah. No, in fact, for the past week, we've seen how celebrities in China were actually lashing out on a lot of Malaysians as well. So I think this is not really the right way to handle the crisis. Yeah. Any thoughts from you guys?
I think that everyone would be very much interested to know what actually happened to the plane. Particularly, everyone is talking about the black box. They're showing so much interest. The whole world is watching this incident. So on my part, as a concerned citizen, I think the best is we hope this issue comes to an end and the plane can be found. And we are, of course, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed, hoping for a miracle.
Yeah.
Racist voices, sometimes people just say things that are really mean to other people, and obviously this is at an international scale, but I do believe there are rational voices out there.
So definitely labeling each other as incompetent liars and murderers and whatnot is not helpful. Yeah? That's the point to be made. So next moving on to 11 Myanmar news from Myanmar, talking about how thousands are protesting against Dhaka Tribunes, which is another news house, talking about the article that they published recently because of the article actually suggested that you could one of the way to solve what's happening in Myanmar, especially when it comes to the Dhaka region, not the Dhaka region, but rather near the Chittagong region, is to actually hold a referendum so that you would give the people of the three states, namely Sitwe and Muang Dao, from Rakhine State, to give them a choice whether they want to secede and join Chittagong division or even join the Bangladesh, actually. So this is actually an op-ed, like we mentioned. It's not actually the editorial opinion, but rather one of the articles that as an opinion piece that was submitted to Dhaka Tribune, right? So they suggested that, hey, one of the solution could be give the people a choice, a referendum, in Rakhine State. If the people want to, they can secede and be autonomous themselves. So,
but talking about the Rakhine State, culturally they have always seen themselves as being part of Myanmar. I mean, but yeah, the problem with them is they are truly stateless in the sense that both countries do not want to recognize them. I'm just wondering, like, why, what kind of solution that would be a win-win situation in this case?
Because of course, presenting one of the, let's say, point of view of the thousands of protesters. These are people who were organized by Buddhist monks, which we have earlier referred to be one of the nationalist, more extreme right-wing movement that's happening in Myanmar now. It's called a 696 movement. So there is 1,500 people protesting this time in front of the Bangladeshi embassy in Myanmar, right? So their point of view is that firstly, they strongly condemn the Dhaka Tribune article, which calls for Butidong, Maungdaw, and Sitwe region to be taken into Bangladeshi territory. And secondly, they oppose the use of Rohingya, which doesn't exist on earth in the national census.
So what existed previously?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what they should consider then, because I think that they're legitimately people, right? They couldn't just not exist, right?
I mean, culturally, they are closer to Myanmar than to Bangladesh, even though they might look Bangladeshi on the surface, but the language that they speak, even the food, the way the cultural, the social cultural of the society there is much more closer to the region of Myanmar.
I would also think that it also depends on them where do they feel a sense of home. From what I understand, a lot of them feel that Myanmar is very much part of their home, although they're not being recognized. And it is sad to see that they are being pushed out and pushed back and forth like that, like objects kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true. I think the biggest problem there is there's no freedom for them to be who they want to be and be part of the national identity of being a Burmese, sorry.
And I think that one of the very troubling things for me personally is that the danger of mixing nationalism and religion. Because
there is. I mean, it's happening here in Malaysia as well.
Yeah, in fact, there, I think they even set up this Nationality and Religion Safeguarding Association.
Wow, that is going back to the time of of World War II, I guess, during the Nazi time.
Yeah, we try to safeguard religion and also nationality. So this will lead to a lot of trouble in the future if it's not curbed urgently. In fact, I know that a lot of different groups, whether it's from the government or from the interfaith initiatives, they are trying to address this issue to prevent, let's say, this group from gaining more influence.
Yeah,
and
I think it was like a news about banning interfaith law a few days ago in Myanmar. I don't know, you still remember?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is in that?
So there's a proposal to ban interfaith marriages
in
Myanmar.
Yeah. So apparently it's kind of like Malaysia after that.
We are completely unable to have interfaith marriages.
Basically, in Myanmar, what happened is that if you want to marry a Buddhist, you kind of had to convert to Buddhism, which I thought was absurd because, like, let's say...
I thought that only happens in Malaysia.
Yeah, because nowhere in the sutta, there is any written laws like that, nothing like that. In fact, in Buddhism, it doesn't really matter whether you are labeled as Buddhism or not. It doesn't matter. It's really the understanding of what matters.
Yeah, I mean that's true. We can take positive example of countries like Indonesia and Philippines, where even the Muslim, Christians, and Buddhists and all accepted interfaith marriages, even though maybe it might be frowned upon by some religious group. But at least in general, it's accepted.
Especially not by the law. It's not enforced, which is important for their religious rights.
Yeah.
So again, I personally think that there should be a separation of state and religion, especially
secularism.
Yeah.
So we are promoting secularism here.
Okay, I'm not sure if I would endorse secularism fully, because let's just say that I think that secular state is good, but at the same time freedom of religion should also be preserved. Right, so
I think we need like a new session just to talk about secularism or secular state. a debate on it.
Right. So next up, also coming up from Burma, talking about how the army chief says that ethnic conflicts must end for Burma's development from the Irrawaddy. Because he's talking about, this is in the context of the controversial 2008 constitution, yeah? Because, the constitution was actually one of the things that was pushed through by the military, government. So it was pushed through, and also, a lot of people claim that it's rigged, and also it prevents a lot of things. For example, if Aung San Suu Kyi to be the next president. So, reforming that is also one of the key area, okay? But besides that, it is also eliminating the ethnic armed conflict. That is the most important factor before Burma can move forward. And I think that it's pretty significant because what happened was that 9,000 plus Burma army soldiers were marching in front of all this military chief is actually saying that. So I think that it's pretty important because now he's talking about nationwide ceasefire and which is important for the eternal peace and whatnot. But whether is it actually done or if it's just plain talk, then it's something to be watched. But I think it's pretty significant that they are acknowledging this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, right now, the international media and international attention is fixed to Myanmar. So I think this kind of development, you can see it as a positive thing, but on the long term is still much room to see whether it would be a permanent thing or not.
And of course, this by the way took place during the 69th Armed Forces Day Parade, commemorating the day Burmese army took arms against Japanese fascist forces in 1945. Yeah, so it's a celebration, and they are speaking about what's important to them in the future. So, all right, moving on to the Irrawaddy as well, talking about how timber has been smuggled out of Burma illegally, and it's rampantly, talking about 5.7 billion worth of timber.
Wow,
and
billions.
Yeah, and 40% of that, 48% was actually, locked illegally without any government permission.
48%. It's
and
like almost half.
Right, and 72% were smuggled across the border through illicit export deals. This is according to an environmental investigation agency report. So of course, a forest department official jumped up to defend that, talking about that environmental assessment report isn't accurate. Talking about their definitions of legal timber, at how there is a lot of different standards for international standards that not applicable in domestically. And of course, they were talking about, of course we have some bad cases, but if you're saying that we are doing things 100% wrong, I don't agree with that. Yeah.
Sounds similar, right?
Yeah,
Sounds very similar, yeah.
A lot of bells home.
Always the old debate whether you want to have save the environment or develop the country.
Yeah, that's true.
But then again, I think what also rings some bell home to me is that you're not really addressing the EIA report, but rather you're just saying that, denying it on the basis that we're doing things at least a little bit right, and then the report is claiming we're doing it 100% wrong.
Or we are Asian, we're following Asian values. So it's very different from the Western construction.
Yeah, that's true. But on a larger scale, I mean, if you look at the Southeast Asian region, this is not just a Burmese problem. I mean, in Malaysia, in Sabah, Sarawak, there are huge cases of timber, being either being controlled by just a few families or being sort of smuggled out and in and out of the country. And I think in Southeast Asia, especially we are the home of very rich like virgin forests and all these natural resources, including like high quality timbers. This is something that would definitely, I would say, it would definitely should be seen on a larger scale, not just on the Burmese scale, even though if the report is on Burma alone. Yeah.
So I would like to stress that again, arguments such as, for example, how the EIA report is watching the situation from a very negative point of view, and they do not recognize that we are going to reform, are definitely not the best of arguments against illegal logging. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are in transition right now, so any bad news is really bad for their regime.
But of course, I personally think that the best defense is just to start acting instead of jumping out in defense. Yeah,
that's true.
Right. So next up, moving to Philippines from the Manila Bulletin, talking about how a few news coming up there. First is there are ongoing peace process happening in Mindanao, talking about how new era of genuine development for Muslims. So the Vice President, Binay, actually yesterday said that he's hopeful that signing the comprehensive agreement on the region on the Bangsa Moro will not only pave way for peace but also build progress in Mindanao. Because what happened is that we know that there is a long-standing disputes in the southern Philippines. Because let's say it is again back to religion, talking about how the southern Philippine Muslims wanted to separate themselves from the rest of the Philippines, having their autonomous region and whatnot. So it seems like right now things are happening pretty peacefully, in that they have reached quite an agreement.
Yeah, finally, right? It's been going on for very long, for decades maybe. And I think one of the key players in trying to create, trying to sort of fast-pace the peace process, we have to acknowledge the Malaysian government as the mediator for this peace process.
Do you know what kind of role they have played before?
So the Malaysian government, they played the role as the mediator, being a Muslim country as well as being a neighbor for Philippine government. They sort of chaired a few rounds of dialogues between the Philippine governments and the Bangsa Moro people as well as the extreme groups there.
So now that this comprehensive agreement on the Bangsa Moro is also known as CAB is signed, so we hope that in the region, because it's also one of the most outstanding accomplishments, so yeah, we hope that there will be peace finally in the region.
Yeah, finally, right? The Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF. Yeah. Don't laugh. They have done a lot of like really brutal what do you call that?
Assault.
Assault. Yeah, like they kidnap tourists, kidnap locals and international journalists in a way for them to sort of like say, hey, we want Mindanao to be our own. But this is actually a good development to show that they can be independent but still at the same time part of the Philippine nation state.
So what was mentioned was that this is a partnership in many ways, a partnership between the Bangsa Moro and the Philippine government, between and among peoples of different faith and ethnicity, and between men and women. Yeah. So yeah, we hope that that's true.
But one good news among all the things happening.
Although I wouldn't say that the methods that they have used to achieve this was really good. Yeah. Because we know that it wasn't really through a very peaceful means that they tried to achieve this, yeah?
But, the case of Bangsa Moro is not something that is unique, because within Southeast Asia, there were a lot of cases of separatist group and the infamous one right now would be Southern Thai. And then in the past, they were the ones in Aceh.
Yeah, even right now in Aceh, I think it's still happening.
And Timor-Leste, where they succeeded from Indonesia.
But it actually makes me kind of question all the separatist movement right now. Because like if we look at a lot of places, whether is it in Crimea, whether is it in Taiwan, whether is it in different areas, it seems like a lot of different communities want to separate themselves. What is behind that, in your opinion?
For me, I believe, this is just my own personal thought. I think nation state shouldn't be too big. I mean, in a sense, countries shouldn't be too centralized and yet too big. Communities or even people within their own area should have their own decision to how they want to be governed, and having autonomous areas or autonomous region is probably a positive sort of balance between the idea of nation state and also communities being empowered to control their own destiny.
I think it's an issue of self-determination of states, but there needs to be a legitimate reason for self-determination, such as they are subject to oppression, minority ethnics being oppressed, and violation of human rights. And I think that there needs to be strong reasons before such self-determination act.
But I just personally think that it might be a sign because a symptom because of the, let's say, the central government failings to be responsive or to be inclusive, things like that.
It's also because of the cultural history of certain of countries. For example, Aceh has always been a distinct region within the Indonesian population. They even have their own prime minister once upon a time. Yeah, surprisingly. So I mean, this kind of sort of self-determination is not just about it's not just about freedom and universal values and self-determination. It's also about the social culture history of those population.
So of course, Aquino, who's the president of Philippines, also have something to say about this peace process. So he is issuing a stern warning, saying that it's a historic peace accord that they have managed to establish after a grueling negotiation that spanned 17 years with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, right, in southern Philippines. But, however, he issued a warning against those who dare to disrupt the peace process. Because he says that now is the dawn for books, not bullets, for paintbrushes, not knives, for the whole communities, not evacuation centers, and for rewarding toil and not endless strife.
I totally agree. I mean, for society to grow, as in like into a much more civilized society, it has to be books, not bullets.
I think that was well said. Yeah. All right. So moving on to Phnom Penh news, talking about how Vietnam Prime Minister Hun Sen says, I'm sorry, not Vietnam. I mean Cambodia. Talking about how violence will not be tolerated. Seems like we are in a pretty turbulent region right now. But anyway, for Hun Sen, so they warned that the opposition should not be going ahead with their plan to hold a public gathering in the capital's Freedom Park on Sunday.
And why?
And this is because the opposition were planning for People's Congress. So, which I don't know. I don't know if it is rightly said by Hun Sen, because
sounds fishy, right?
He's saying that, we are still being tolerant. The law has limitations. It does not mean that you can go outside of the law. the country has a constitution, our country has laws. If people deviate from laws into violence, there will be no tolerance.
Yeah.
The law must take action.
So what about the opinions from the scholar activism on this?
Sounds very familiar to back home as well, like most of the news around the region.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a bit of a domino effect, maybe possibly that has spread out to different parts of the region in Asia, ASEAN. So I would foresee that a lot of people would be pushing for it as well, because democracy and having your own rights has always been one of our fundamental fundamental rights as a human. So and to be able to express and debate about these issues should be accepted in most communities. So,
do you think it will propel into violence? I mean, that's the justification for the president, for the prime minister. Sorry.
It sounds very suggestive by him, actually, that you should follow the law, not deviate from it, and stuff like that.
Like, I would support. I might not support whatever they are protesting on, but I will support their right to protest, right?
Yeah.
That's how you could, I believe, improve democracy and let certain causes come true and whatnot.
It's international human rights. If you look at the UDHR and the ICCPR, freedom of association, freedom of assembly is a human right, and I think that right should not be denied. Except until they go to a certain extent when creating riots and all that.
As long as not violent.
Yeah.
Non-violent.
I see. But what if what if what he says, right? You know, it will fall into violence. So, I mean,
I think he can't play God, right?
No, I mean, I think his argument comes from the perspective of preemptive justification. I would say, but personally, I think that the law itself would protect citizens into, protest if they have such law.
Well, I don't know if that justifies like preempting things and whatnot. But of course, we're pretty biased here for human rights. So right, next up, talking about the rights to vote coming from Jakarta Globe. It's about Indonesian woman who is marginalized at the polls. Claims an article by Jakarta Globe talking about how women have their own issues, and it seems like they're prone to being directed on who to vote for according to the wishes of dominant figures in their family or society, most likely husband, father, religious leader, or community chief. That's why that they would need, let's say, to champion a certain woman issue and to appeal to women voters, and they should stop treating women voters as an emotional and not rational voting bloc. So, and this is also coming back with a lot of historical reasons, because, like, for example, Susilo in the past has managed to attract Indonesian women voters by depicting himself as a handsome and gallant person, and playing down on his manly military background. So it seems silly, but it worked for Susilo to win the presidency twice. So I what do you guys think about feminist argument?
I think it's alright to talk about gender equality and all that, but it has to be visible to a certain extent. And I think the issue that we are looking at here is the issue of education, among the citizens. Whether the citizens are mature enough to have their own to think who is right to vote and not, and no one is entitled to assert values onto another. Like when we look here that women are told who to vote and not, I think the government should respect the views of the women who they think is much better to vote, rather than asserting their values and tell them who you should vote.
Well, actually, I was speechless just now because I have problem with when you commented that Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono tried to attract women voters by depicting himself as a handsome Ghanaian person. I have problem with that particular idea, you know.
Yeah, well, no, he's mainly also playing down on his manly military background. So burnishing.
Mm-hmm.
Is he playing it up or playing it down?
Sounds like playing it up.
Oh, okay.
As long as attracting the voters to go and vote for him, right?
Yeah. But then if you look at the Javanese culture, right, they are very patriarchal. As in like they see male as the leader of the pack or leader of the family. So I think it's sort of like I would say it has a spillover effect over their politics as well in a sense. But being a Malaysian, I think it has to go beyond just being, you know, having patriarchal cultural to influence politics. Politics should be beyond, it should be gender neutral in a way.
But coming back to Malaysia as well, Malaysia has a history of not being very gender equal.
Yeah,
exactly.
tell me about that.
Yeah, especially during parliament, they're always just discriminating the women, and women should be represented, especially with 50% of the population being women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to
dismiss.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about our personal opinion of our only male commentator?
You see, in Malaysia, we have more than 50% of voters who are female. But you look at the parliamentarians in our country. Do we have 50% of female parliamentarians? The answer is no. Why? Because I think talented women needs to be brave to step up to the task and be candidates in political parties during elections. But whether the opportunity is given to them, the equal opportunity, or would the political party favors tronism? The leadership will always choose those people that they favor, rather than they look at certain things like gender equality, who is the best candidate, and proper representation.
Thank you very much, our dear men.
Very good answer.
Right, now moving on to Vietnam, talking about how there are big holes in Vietnam's 1.9% unemployment rate from Thanh Nien News. So currently, the 1.9% of unemployment rate in Vietnam is calculated late last year. That included many well-qualified young people who had been jobless for more than a year.
Wow, a
Yeah.
year. So how they, feed themselves, pay the bills, right?
Don't know, but apparently 1.9% is actually a pretty low figure compared to a lot of different countries. But there's also problems in calculating that, because how they calculated that is that even if you are working 1 hour, you are also considered as someone who has a job.
Oh.
1 hour a week, even.
Oh, that's not a very good calculation, right?
But of course, with the current 1.9% is among the world's lowest. So, but we're also looking at how the ministry is looking into this area and talking about how they are going to tackle the unemployment issue in Vietnam.
I have problems when they say that it is one of the world's lowest.
I'm not sure, but I think the US is higher than 1.9.
I see.
Yep.
Yeah, the US is 1.9, and that's a first world country. So,
I don't know how they count it.
but yeah, to hear that that even 1 hour is considered employed that is not
an accurate measurement, right?
Exactly. Even for us, what is that? Our minimum wage is now at 4.2 or 4.5. Is that the minimum wage?
Wage, you mean?
In Malaysia, the minimum wage per hour.
Oh, per hour. I know that
per month, right?
Yeah,
per month is 900 to 900 for Peninsula and 800 for Sabah and Sarawak.
So I would assume that will be only inclusive of the employment rate, whether you be considered employed or not, if you're actually meeting the hours and getting that minimum wage as well.
You're saying, sorry?
No, I would assume that if you are having this calculation, you should take up this kind of measurements. How many hours? Take into account how many
maybe
hours.
a minimum bar of certain hours and minimum bar of certain wage.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Of course, they are investigating. Even with 1.5%, why are they not higher unemployment, lower unemployment
And the
rate?
demographic is between 15 to 24 years old, right? I mean, the one is being mentioned in the report.
15-24?
No. That's just one of the quarterly labor report talking about how, in comparison for the 15 to 24 years old, it's around threefold the average rate to be unemployed. And even more so for college degrees and technical expertise to be fourfold the possibility to be unemployed.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they are investigating the reason if this is either because of their own pickiness or the fact that their training did not suit the market demands. So because they know that 45% of the unemployed are long-term cases, so having no job for more than a year.
Wait, I don't really understand. So if you have a higher education, then it's less likely for you to get the job?
Well, it is said so.
So it's so in a way that the government is not investing in all this.
I think
Channeling them into the right place,
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
I think majority of the job could be like low skill, like cheap labor's job rather than high skill jobs. It could be like they are still suffering from labor. They are still suffering from an economy that provides cheap labor rather than provide a more balanced
jobs,
high skill and balanced job.
And also, one of the, let's say, worrying trend, for me at least, is that for Vietnam, wealthy population is set to grow among the fastest in the world, according to a forecast. Yes, you're talking about really high net worth individuals of at least 30 million. Yeah, high net worth, like super rich individuals. So it's set to grow faster in Vietnam than in any other country over the next decade. This is according to one of the forecasts from real estate services provider, Knight Frank.
So I guess
this UK-based firm.
So I guess they are no longer considered a socialist country.
You wonder why this happens in a socialist country.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the symptom of having a very small but growing rich population is alarming, not just in Vietnam. I think in the whole of Southeast Asia, we have a growing number of billionaires and people who just get a lot of money from production or economy that is not the non-productive economy. Non-productive economy can be categorized as economy that is based on rental economy and natural resources economy, where you don't have to produce something new.
And there's a lot of crony capitalism.
Crony capitalism is definitely a cancer, I guess.
But what is worrying, I believe, is that, for example, this UK-based firm claims that their forecast shows that the number of ultra-high net worth individuals in Vietnam will increase by 166%, to 293 in 2023, whereas Indonesia is expected to be second in ASEAN with a growth of 144% for ultra-high net worth individuals, followed by Ivory Coast and Kazakhstan. So yeah, I personally think that it's pretty interesting, like the point on how being a socialist country, this is happening, like such big gap in wealth inequality.
If you look at the recent index on crony capitalism by the Economist Malaysia, is ranked third, like surprisingly.
Illicit outflow, whatnot. So again, this always comes back to one, possibly corruption in the country. Two, well, maybe there's just really educated people rising to the top. Up to you.
But the Vietnamese economist, Bui Kien Tan, say that the increasing number of ultra-rich people is actually sending a positive signal to the economy. Do you agree such thing?
Well, it depends on what kind of lens you put on,
so.
right? Because I think the capitalist argument is that possibly, it's a rising tide that will raise all. So it's okay to have super rich individuals as long as it's a rising tide that will lift everyone together as well.
No, I always believe that in this saying that the rich only get richer and the poor only get poorer.
Guess who said a similar statement? It was Dr. Mahathir a few weeks ago.
In Himalaya, right? Yeah, I was there.
Oh, you were there listening to
share your experience.
Yeah. Actually, I asked him a question regarding Malaysia Incorporated with one of his policies. How does he justify this concept of Malaysia Incorporated? Which means the country, the government works closely with the private sector and functions as a whole, like a country functions as a company as a whole. Okay, how you defend it when currently Malaysia is ranked third in the crony capitalism index? Well, his answer is, I can help only those who can help themselves, particularly the certain class of people who can actually achieve success. Rather, I help most of everyone who are bound to fail. Well, I was quite surprised to see this type of answer because with all the government affirmative actions and all that, we don't really see its effect and how the way he justified the questions that are put forward to him, not just by me but by Haris Ibrahim as well. He has his own charm of answering questions, but is what we call paradox, answering the question without actually answering it during the talk.
A very skilled politician, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. This is our new session for ASEAN Breakfast Call. We'll now move on to the next session after the break.